Okay, well, Tamsin, first, I just have to welcome you to my podcast, which would be like me, the closest thing I could do to inviting you into my living room. So I'm super excited to have you here. So just let's start off with a big welcome to you.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I like being in your living room.
Yes, there's a lot of great conversations that happen in my living room. Here's what I think is going to be really interesting to talk about. You have such a unique lens to the menopause conversation, perhaps the most unique lens of anybody out there. My clinic was a lifestyle clinic. I took women to the grocery store and taught them how to read labels. I helped help moms make good nutritious decisions for their kids. We talked about detox. And when we were doing those kind of conversations, nobody was doing lifestyle for women. Nobody was talking about hormones online. There was like a cultural hush around menopause. And in just like 3 years, like such a small amount of time, we've gone from not talking about it to everybody talking about it.
Yeah.
So let's start off with this. Where do you feel like we are in the cultural conversation around menopause right now? Like, what is it that is the tried and true? What are people gravitating towards? And what is it that women need to know right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're so right about it. When I go and I think back to 3 years ago and even 5 years ago, we did a documentary. We're working on another one now. And we got a response like, there's no audience for it. It's a niche audience. Nobody wants to talk about it. Now I feel like we're in a place where I don't know that a lot of people don't want to talk about it because they
Yes.
want, which is a great place to be as long as they're getting the right information, right? So I think that there's a lot of conversation about it from a couple of different areas. Social media is one, the marketplace is another, businesses and seeing how we can, this is a big group of women that want a lot of answers and obviously businesses
Hmm.
go, "Oh, what does that mean?" And
Yep.
then I think that the third big place obviously is in workplace, and then we have
Mm.
politics and legislature and all those other areas. But I do think that there is a lot of confusion out there right now, but then I also say, okay, well, then we can work on some of that, but at least we've got it like pulled out into the, culture or the atmosphere and the environment, and men aren't afraid to say it. I was in a meeting before I jumped on here and I said, I literally saw the thermostat and it said 80 degrees. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not sitting in a room like this. And I go, guys, I said, my patch isn't going to cut through 80 degrees. So you got to fix that AC. And nobody felt weird about it. Nobody was like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
Tamsin again with the whole hot flash thing. So
Yeah.
I do feel like happy that we've got the words out there. Not everybody, but we've got the words out there. But I do think we need to tweak now a little bit.
Yeah. So the conversation has been started. And one of the things that I realized in, like, this is from the hundreds of thousands of comments we get on YouTube and my
Yeah.
socials, is that women are confused. And we have like gone from a place where nobody was to do HRT and now everybody's to do HRT. But then there's little nuances in that, like, what if you don't get the right doctor? There's a learning curve for your
Hmm.
dosage. Where does lifestyle fit into this?
Hmm.
So, can you talk a little bit about what we know culturally, like the experts right now, about HRT? When do we start it? How long do we need to be on it? What's the cultural message on this?
Understanding of it. Yeah, and I'd love to talk about some of the confusing parts because I think that that's what I'm seeing the same thing now, a repetition, right, of the
Yeah,
issues. So people don't know where they got the fear, right, of hormone therapy. I mean, we
well
kind of
said.
all know it now, but there was a study in 2002 that I know you've talked about many times, the Women's Health Initiative, that scared, the headline scared a lot of women. So in the back of our mind somewhere we have estrogen equals breast cancer, right? Because that's kind of what the media pulled from that, put into the headlines, scared women, scared doctors, scared medical institutions. And I wasn't around reporting on those things then, or that I don't remember it. But I do know now, fast forward 20 years later, 3 years ago, everybody was afraid of it. Today, we're talking about it openly. I just started doing a
Hmm.
video like post your patch, so we could just kind of normalize what that even means about it. But I think the biggest challenges we have right now is what is HRT slash MHT slash HT, like what is hormone therapy? Because that can be
Yeah.
confusing, right? If you're just jumping into the conversation. And I'm a regular woman, so I feel like I'm almost a conduit between understanding what the doctors are saying and then finding a way to simplify it for a book or for the documentary. So I think what is it? What comprises of it? Could you say there's nuances? So are we talking about vaginal? Are we talking about estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone?
Hmm.
And then in lifestyle, where lifestyle plays. And then I think that the next area of confusion is it that I'm at risk because my mom did have breast
Mm.
cancer and died of breast cancer. Am I allowed to do that or am I not?
Mm.
And then I guess maybe the
Hmm.
final one would be I have a doctor that is telling me this or telling me that, telling me it's not safe for me, or doesn't even want to have the conversation. So that's where all this confusion happens. So if
Mm.
we talk about the guidelines right now, most women are able to should be able to go to their doctor when they're in perimenopause, that time of, before you're in menopause, where your period stops, where, you're no longer having a period. And it could be birth control or it could be a form of hormone therapy. That could be a mix
Hmm.
of hormone
Hmm.
therapy. And you're 51 years old on average when you get, when you go into menopause, some women before, some women after. And the guidelines, to my understanding, and you know this better than me, is that you can stay on hormone therapy for the rest of your life. And we have a lot
Hmm.
of the leading voices, doctors out there saying like that's the case. Now we have different guidelines. So the guidelines that most people refer to are the Menopause Society, which says that if you're 60 or you're within 10 years of that menopausal transition, then that's another conversation for you to be
Yeah.
having individually with your doctor.
Yeah.
When it comes to breast cancer, then that's another conversation. So you're right. There's so many nuances now in between things that are leaving women going, but what about me? Because it's
Right.
not clear cut.
Yeah, and I think this is the downside of social media. I keep saying stop organizing your health around a 90-second reel.
Yes, you're right.
We've got to look at the experts and then ask ourselves how it fits for us. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I'm sort of seeing two sides of the HRT conversation. I actually, the last leg of Age Like a Girl, we brought in an editor who had worked with me on Fast Like a Girl. And one of the things that came up is that she's in her 60s. She said, my friends and I are upset. And we're upset because we weren't even given the option. So what do we do now? And she was like, literally. And I was like, oh, that's a very valid point. And then on the other side, we are getting messages from women that are like, I went to the doctor, I put a patch on and nothing's helping. I feel worse. And then another part of the conversation we have is people like Mary Claire who are getting up and saying, well, actually, doctors haven't been trained in menopause. So it feels like the wild, wild west still a little bit. And are there ways we can engage our doctors in conversation that keeps it open? We don't get gaslit. We're in a collaborative experience. You've interviewed so many doctors. How do we know we're at the right doctor, and how do we have this conversation to get the nuance we need?
Yeah, I love this question. And you're right, and Dr. Mary Claire is right that a lot of doctors have not been trained about this. When we go back to what that study was, a lot of the doctors that I've interviewed, and especially for the last documentary we did, the M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause, doctors were like, I got 2 hours. I got no training. I did it myself. It really wasn't a conversation. We weren't even talking about perimenopause. And that's in the OBGYN discipline. That's not
Right.
saying we're not talking about our cardiologist or our whatever other doctor we're talking about. We're talking about our general practitioner. We're talking about OBGYN, which is like, what? But
Yeah.
there are a lot of incredible doctors out there that are learning on their own and that are educating themselves and are being certified by the Menopause Society that says, look, we're doing these extra hours, we're doing this continuing medical education so we can get them up to speed or beyond where a lot of the other doctors are not willing to have the conversation. So when somebody says to me, how do I even know if it's the right doctor? My answer is, one, are they willing to have the conversation?
Right.
Two, are
Right.
they all or none with everything? Three, are they saying, okay, maybe for you hormone therapy is good, but maybe it's not okay. And maybe we need to incorporate these other parts of
Yeah.
lifestyle. So I'm appreciative to the doctors that are willing to go out there on social media and talk about this, and doctors that are willing willing to have the conversation, and doctors that are willing to have all the conversations, because I don't think that I have seen that there's this, here's the answer and here's the only answer. And I think that everybody in this space will, most people in this space will tell you that we are still learning, that we have a lot of things that we have to focus on, that we're going in front of the FDA to say, like, why do we have a black box label on, localized vaginal estrogen when it's been deemed by now, even most of the organizations all across the world, to say it is safe for pretty much all women. So I think we're in the middle of a learning curve. There's no question about that. And unfortunately and fortunately, the onus is on the woman. And that sucks in a lot of ways.
Always.
It's terrible.
Always.
It is. It is. But the good news about that is those 90-second reels are giving women questions to ask. And so even if we don't have all the answers with them, we do have the questions. And that's what I hope that they use it. So don't use it as your diagnosis, but use it as a place to say, okay, Dr. So-and-so, will you have this conversation with me? Am I at risk? Am I not at risk? Here's what I've learned. Are you willing to talk openly about it? And what other things do I have to implement? Because it's not, hormone therapy is not it's not the end all of everything.
Right.
It's going to handle a few of those symptoms, certain symptoms, very important ones, and deal with a lot of long-term health issues that we want to talk about when it comes to women's health and midlife, which is your heart and your brain and your bones. And those are the things that we want to be talking about. And thank goodness for, doctors like Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who is every single day in a research lab trying to figure out, how we deal with and tackle Alzheimer's and women in menopause and what's going on next in our lives.
Yeah, Lisa's a great segue to my next thought on hormone replacement. And when I brought her on the podcast here, when she was promoting the Menopause Brain, she taught me about three times a woman's brain actually reorganizes itself. And I found this so fascinating that I ended up down months and months in PubMed trying to really understand. And so it left me with this burning question that I've now written a book about, which is, what is the purpose of menopause? And what I learned from Lisa was that there is a pruning away. The drop in estrogen is causing a pruning away of neurons we no longer need in our brain so that we can grow new neurons. And in all the research I've done, those new neurons are built for leadership. They're built for purpose. They're not meant... This is not your time to fade away. But what signals the drop in the change in the brain is the drop in hormones.
Yes.
So when we put a patch on, we also need to make sure that over time there's an adjustment to the dosage. Is that also what you're hearing? Like, should every 100%. Year women be doing less and less and less, because we still want to be working naturally with what the body is meant to do?
Yeah, I don't know if it's less and less, but I certainly know it's being aware of that. So there's always the question about blood tests and like, when, my hormones are here one day. But when you hit menopause and then you're starting with whether you've decided to do hormone therapy or not do hormone therapy, knowing that's where you can actually know where your levels are, right? Because you're not all over the place. Like perimenopause is like this, it's just all over the place. So I just think like it's that chaotic area of it. And so, for me, I've had to go up in some of my doses. Now I'm leveled out where I'm feeling good, but I will say I started out in a very small patch, and then I was like, oh my God, I've got these symptoms again. They started me as low a dose as possible. And now we've moved around a little bit. Now I go in and I get my consistent blood test. I'm on testosterone. Every 6 months I go in and I make sure that it's not too much, it's not too little, that it's still, doing what it needs to do. So I think that the jury's out for me anyway on whether or not I take that and scale it back, because right now I'm feeling good where I am and I don't want to go back to where I wasn't feeling good. And I know that there's been a lot of talk of like, you just stop it, you're going to revert yourself back, and it won't have been very helpful. It's not going to keep replacing and replenishing like what you've lost, right?
Yeah, consistency.
But I know there's a lot of women that are concerned about that. Like, how long do I have to be on this? And it's not like it's an antibiotic. I mean, that's just not how that works, where you do 10 days and we're done.
And you're over.
and you're over. But it's also where I think that we have an opportunity when we talk about the pruning of the brain to put ourselves in that first position to say, what other changes can I make in my lifestyle so that
Yeah.
maybe that is also helpful in this process, and maybe I won't need as much. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but right now I'm where I am and I haven't gone up at all in 2.5 years, and I feel like that's a
Hmm.
win for me. I feel like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe my body is leveling out. My brain feels like I have memorization now,
Hmm.
and when I did an interview like this before, I had a conversation, I have notes in front of me
Oh
because I
God,
couldn't even remember
yes.
my own name. I'm like, what?
Yes.
What
Yes.
did she ask me? But so I do feel different, but I
Yeah.
want to keep feeling good different.
I have a funny story. So I this is going to sound weird, but I sort of haphazardly ended up on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of the CEO. Don't tell him this, but when he invited me on, like I didn't know
What?
who he was. I know.
Dr.
And
Mindy.
I know. And I was like, okay, who's this guy from England? And my staff was like, you're
Yeah,
getting
we'll
on
do
a plane.
it.
Yeah, they were like, you're getting on a plane and you're going. And I was like, I'm a little tired. They're like, no, go. Like literally one of my staff member was like, you're going to go. I'm not going to let you not
Yeah,
go. So
I'm
I
bringing you.
go. Yeah, I go and I sit down and like
Oh my
about
God.
5 minutes in, I'm like, oh, this is kind of a big deal. This guy's kind of a big deal. And 3.5 hours, a 3.5 hour interview. And at the end, I wanted to grab his 31-year-old shirt and be like, listen, you don't put a menopausal woman in a 3.5 hour interview. I don't know who you are, but that is not okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, I gotta say, first of all, I would have dragged you there myself if I'd have heard you were like doing it and then you were like debating. And
Yeah.
and second of all, you're so right about that. But I think thank goodness for that, because I can't even imagine what people have taken away from that interview.
Yeah,
So
it was a huge interview. There was like over 10 million views
I
within a
remember, I
year. Yeah,
remember it.
it was quite a moment.
Well, I mean, there better be that many 3 hours. So
Right.
3 hours of
Yeah.
brilliant things said. But I do want to say one thing is thank you to doctors like you that take your time and do this, that take your
Mm,
time and get out there and
thank you.
educate, that are constantly speaking and are constantly learning and are constantly doing the things you don't have to do, once you're
Hmm.
at this stage of your career and still doing it. And I
Hmm.
can't say it enough. And I think it's really why I decided, or I don't, I just felt this need and desire and understanding of elevating these voices, because I could see very clearly, like, I feel like myself as a journalist has always been a conduit, right, between the
Hmm.
information and the people who need it most. And so and in distilling it down so that it's easier to understand and simplified. And like, even with my book, I'd get information in interviews and I'm like, oh, I have brain fog, so I have to write this for somebody with brain
Right.
fog because I've got it right now.
Mm,
And so I would go
beautiful.
through that distill process. And the same thing with the documentary. We would do hours of interviews and really have to distill down the areas that we would pull out to make it understandable. And so I think that that's been something I've been so grateful for with doctors like yourself. So I know how many people that helped. I
Yeah,
just I
thank
just
you.
do. So thank you. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Well, there's a little behind the scenes.
That's okay.
Um, which actually brings up a really interesting thing, because several of my friends who are doctors and helping women, we were really agitated for a long time that the only two people that were talking about hormones were Huberman and Peter Attia. And they
Sure.
would I'm not dissing them, but what I want to
Yeah.
point out is that for a long time, even our education was coming from men.
Yeah.
And I kept listening to those and thinking, you can tell me from an educated point of view, but you're not having the experience. So it skews the way
Yeah.
in which you can speak about this. And then last week, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Dr. Vonda Wright. I know she was just on your podcast.
Yeah.
And she said something that I really loved, which is, she's like, you need a doctor who can listen with her menopausal ears.
Oh, so true.
And
So
I was
true.
like, that is important. So do you feel like there's room, and this is just straight up let's just call it what it is. Is there room for men to be educating us right now? Or do we really need to be looking at going to female doctors who have been in the experience that maybe have a different perspective? Or do we need not to get that nuanced?
I mean, look, I think that at this point we need all the help we can get, right, in terms of helping women that are suffering. And so I don't want to pull anybody out of that conversation, but I sure do really understand how I moved from a male doctor who said to me in his whole practice, and he wrote my patient portal, "In menopause, any questions?" And that was the end of the conversation. It's where it began and where it ended. That was it. And I walked out of that place and I went, what in the I mean, that was my patient portal, those words when my tests came through, my blood test came through. And I went to I made my way around a few female doctors and ended up with one that is absolutely incredible. But I do feel like there is a reason that when you walk into a doctor, or I've walked into the doctors that I've had that are treating me for this stage of my life, they're around my age or they're close enough to my age where they understand what's coming up, because they're either perimenopausal or menopausal. And I do feel like they understand. So I do think there's something to it. My own experience was that I had that kind of ear, and now I have this kind of ear, and this kind of ear feels better.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that I hear men talking about it. I'm happy that men are willing to have the conversation and not going, real,
Right.
I don't know. But I also do think that there is a lot of room for a lot more conversation coming from women. And I think that that's when I got excited. I left my job of 30 years as a journalist doing news to focus on this entirely. Never thought it was anything it never even crossed my mind to do. And I do feel like that's where a lot of the doctors in this space have done the same thing. They have kind of left, not delivering babies as much and moved now into this midlife care, which I have found very interesting, or something around that area, whether it's the lifestyle changes or strictly hormones.
Yeah, yeah. So you went out and did a book tour. I saw you pretty short after that. And I have
Exhausted.
a couple questions. Yeah, I know. I was like, you did? Well, how did that go? Are you crazy?
Oh my gosh, I know. I remember I was like, I think I was comatose and I saw you. I was like, I don't know what I just did, but it was great. It was great.
Well, book launching is a little bit like that. Yeah. I'm actually, this is my 4th book in 5 years.
Gosh.
And
I don't think I knew it was 4.
Yeah, I told my publisher, I'm like, can we take a year break, please? Like it's not just the writing the book, it's launching the book. Like this is a lot. Right. So so we're going to take a little break after this next one.
Okay.
But I think for the longest time, if you Googled menopause symptoms, you would get hot flashes. And what I have now seen in my research is actually the number one symptom is irritability. That seems accurate.
Irritability and anxiety.
Yeah. So what did you notice when you went out and you talked to people and women that are absorbed your book and they're learning how to menopause? I love the title of your book.
Thank you.
Where are the biggest hurdles they're coming up with? What are the biggest symptoms they're having?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest hurdle is the confusion that you talked about early on. I really do. I go back to that. I don't think we can say that enough, right? And I think that that's the big hurdle. The second big hurdle is where to find a practitioner. And so those are the two. And I think that, telemedicine and telehealth have done an incredible job of helping, move that needle along. But just move that along. The second area, which is interesting. So I started out in New York, and then I was in San Francisco and LA and Denver and Dallas and Miami and Chicago and New Jersey. And so it was, it was all over the place. And it was interesting, a couple of things. The irritability is a big one, and then not understanding all these other symptoms that came together. But I think that one of the biggest symptoms that women are struggling with was the lack of sleep and the brain fog. And I think it's because that we're seeing more of these women staying in the workplace a lot longer, right? And being so aware of these symptoms in a bigger way, because a lot of them are moving into different kind of positions. A lot of them are dealing with that, everything that's going on that you and I've talked about before, dealing with elderly parents, dealing with children, whether they're there still or left the nest, and then also dealing with menopause, perimenopause at the same time. So I think that those would be the two big symptoms that women feel are impacting their lives the most. But I did find in every city, it was interesting to see how excited people were to come out and get together and talk. So whether it was about the book or was about the documentary, it wasn't so much those two things, but it was the coming together as a community and saying like, oh wow, there's somebody here physically in person that can help me. So it was interesting when I got off of the online and did that in person, how women were just so grateful to be there with somebody who could listen. And then that brought me to really understand community in this space, which I don't think I think I underestimated community a little
Yeah.
bit, honestly.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's a couple of your friends that you go for walks with. But that's not what this is. This is a whole different definition of community now and what
Yeah.
women need.
And I think if you look, one of the things that I researched in my For Age Like a Girl was, really what is the evolutionary reason behind menopause. And, of course, you find the grandmother hypothesis, which Lisa pointed out in her book. So I actually brought Kristen Hawkes onto this podcast and I interviewed her. And going towards more collaboration is actually our evolutionary design as we move through menopause. And it's really crazy when you break it down, because I never felt like in competition with other women, but primally when we have a reproductive system, if we were sitting around the cave waiting for a man to come back, this sounds so sexist and I'm just going to say it.
No, but it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
If we were waiting for the man to bring the animal kill back, and then when he brought it back, he also brought his seed back, and there was the fertile women were sitting there, vying for for him to reproduce so that the species can continue. Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah. It's horrible.
Horrible.
But it's our primal design that you can't take out of us even in a modern world. So I love what you just said, because when we look at the menopause through the grandmother hypothesis, we actually are meant to have three things returned back to us: fitness, cognition, and social connection. And the grandmothers, according to Lisa, calls them evolutionary heroines, that they were the ones that were keeping the tribe alive. So how do we create that in this online world, in this world that we're in isolation? Is there anything you've seen? I mean, you did 100,000 people for your book launch, but how do we bring women together so they can feel heard in this moment?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that we're still looking at all different ways to do it the right way. I think how I realized it is this, we did the M Factor documentary. We had no money. We had nobody wanted to fund it. Once we got into it and we actually talked to this incredible person that helped us go through the marketing of it city by city. And then that was very helpful. But when we went into this originally, it was like, there's no audience, there's no interest. No. PBS wound up partnering and putting it on the air, and that was great. But we said, well, but we want to, that's like an airing of it. We want more women to see it. So we decided we're going to give it out to women and see what happens. So we were like, maybe 25 different groups will come together, want to show it. And they're saying, we've been in over 800 cities in 45 countries now around the world.
Wow.
The most exciting part of it is the women would take the documentary, they would organize a group themselves of 100 women in their city, whatever city it was. And then they would bring a panel up afterwards of other women to talk about their experience. Maybe a doctor would be there. Maybe a community advocate would be there. What happened after those screenings, it always gives me chills, was the most important part of it, which was the community aspect of it, of the women sharing information about the doctors in their community, about the women sharing what their experiences were, of different groups that came together. Somebody reached out to us recently and said, there's a men's group that was started as a result of it, of men talking about it.
Amazing.
So that's where that community part has happened. Now, how to mobilize that into a bigger way, I don't know that I've conquered yet, but I have seen it now go from online, which is, is always going to be there, but seeing it go into these communities. So the biggest thing I could say to somebody, if they want to advocate for themselves or somebody else, is to find a place to do that within their own community. I don't think any group is too small to feel good about that, whether it's a walk group, whether it's a you want to go and, and talk to your local lawmakers about, what kind of changes, whether you do it in your workplace. So I think that community, might not be the big, large one, but like we did see it for the launch party, the World's Hottest Menopause Party. I was like, all these people are coming together everywhere. Let's bring them
Yeah.
all together at once. So yeah.
I feel like I want to give you the job of figuring out how to rally us all. I appreciate that answer, but I also think you're the gal. You're the gal.
All right.
To bring
Well, I might take that on.
Yeah, maybe we need an even bigger menopause party, but
don't you think though that's
yeah.
where you see the actual change happen? Like I don't know about you, but like anytime you go to something, and even where you and I met, not too a few months, when you bring that energy of women together like that, I feel like it's unstoppable. And I don't know that I would have felt that at 30. I mean, I was in a workplace. I was working alongside women. I would bring them up, behind me or mentor or intern, but I don't ever think that I saw that or felt that before. The desire.
Yeah. And I think, again, I go back to there's like an undercurrent of competition, whether you're in the workplace or you're out at the bar or whatever, when we're in that reproductive or even on socials. Like I have a 25-year-old daughter, and I've watched her at 19 years old completely melt down because of something she saw on socials. So I think there is something that's unique about when we start to lose our cycle, we come together in such a beautiful way. And I keep thinking, how do we amplify that? That's what we need to be doing. And
all
then
right, I'm taking it on with you.
Yeah,
because you're right though. But I mean, when you think about it, you and I think we're around the same. I'm probably older than you. I think I'm older than you, right?
I'm 55.
Okay. So we're the same age. Yeah. And so we've been around, right? We've been around. We met as a result of this. Right? That's how we met. We've probably crossed over in a lot of different areas, but we met as a result of this, and actively are working on our own, in our own ways together and in our communities to continue to amplify this message. I don't know that we would have done that at 30. I think maybe we would have been like, oh, hi. Oh, yeah, okay, I can help you with the book. I'm a journalist. And we go on our merry ways. And so I do feel something, and I don't know about you, but I feel like I could reach out to anybody that I've met within this community now and go, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you help me out with this? Or I need, can you explain this to me? And so I'm hoping that women are starting to do that in their pockets too. And I'm starting to see that. And that's what was exciting to me on that book tour. We did 11 cities, and then we did Vegas to start it off. So 12 cities.
Wow.
And I saw that everywhere, and it was cool. Yeah, it was really cool to see.
So one of the other things you said to me when we met that really sat with me, because I was in the final stages of writing Age Like a Girl.
Yeah, you were.
Met, and it was something I really thought about in the book is you had a woman come up to you at one of the book tours and say, thank you so much for your book. It gave me the courage to divorce my husband. And I spent a lot of time with my collaborative writers saying, I don't want this to be a divorce book. But there is a transformation that's going on where a lot of women are standing up and saying no more. And the husbands, we'll just stay on heterosexual relationships here, that they are like, what is going on? I liked who you were. I don't know who you're becoming. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen, because you address divorce in your book. How does a woman know if it's just a life shift, if it's her husband, does she need to leave? Like, there's a lot of confusion around that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't think we talk about it quite enough. I hesitated too. I was like, am I putting relationships in this book and dating? Like, does that go in a menopause book? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And even, when I went to my publisher and they were like, what, you're doing the whole chapter on it? And I was like, yeah, I think we need a whole chapter on it.
Yep.
And there was a couple of reasons. One, because we certainly have seen that most, there was a study out a few years before I wrote the book that was essentially that women in their, mid 40s, those are the ones that are initiating the divorce, right?
Yeah, like
so
70%.
Right, yeah, like it was a ridiculous 70%. Number. It was a ridiculous number.
It's huge.
And so that's one thing I'm like, that's not just a coincidence. Like, that just didn't just happen. There's not been a lot of, of research on it. There was a study out of the UK that they kind of did a survey and looked at some of that. But what I think is the part that was important to me was to say that, okay, the book that I wrote, How to Menopause, it starts in the doctor's office, but it doesn't end in the doctor's office. And I'm sure, I mean, that's what you're talking
Yep.
about. It
Yep.
goes to all different aspects of our lives, right? And so we can't ignore this relationship part. So we've got to deal with what's happening with us physically and what's going on psychologically, because that's really happening. And then I think we move into that relationship part. So a lot of the conversation I had on the road and even now is like, don't jump and make any of those decisions right this second. Like, get this part stabilized a little bit. Like, I don't say like balance all your hormones first and be perfect, but get this part worked out first. The you has to be the most important first, and then figure that out, because there might be a reason that you don't want to have sex. Look, the person could just be a jerk, but it also could be that like your body just doesn't feel like it. I got married again at 50. I went on my honeymoon and I was like, you want me to have sex with you now? Like I couldn't.
Is that what we're
because
doing? I thought we were just hanging
I was
out.
like, what? I thought we were just in Hawaii for fun. And
Yeah.
so I understand that part of it, but I also say that like there was so much going on with me physically, I couldn't even make that decision then. If I had made a decision, it would have been not the right decision for me. That's also to say, if you go back to what you were saying with Lisa Mosconi and and really kind of clearing out your head and what's important, what I want now, and if I had been married to the same person, I'm not sure that shift would have been, I would have stayed with that same person.
Yeah.
So I think it depends, but I think it's very, very important to get this other part, figured out first, because hormones can really, you wreak havoc. But it's not surprising to me that we see this divorce rate really increase, and women getting back out there and going like, I don't even know if I want to date again. I want to just, I just need me for a little while. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not even looking for somebody else to come, to be near me.
Yeah.
And we're also learning what else we like with our bodies too. And so I think that's where the communication part, that's like sort of that in between of, hey, I never even liked that. I don't know why I thought I liked that, but this is what I like now. So I think that those are hard. Those are not always easy conversations to have, but very necessary.
That's part of losing our filter. We're willing to say what we want to say, right? And so if we're going to have sex, we're not putting up with bad sex. I need to be more descriptive as to, what my needs are here. So I do think that could be the upside of a low libido is maybe you need to talk differently to your spouse about what your needs are, which is a really interesting conversation. There's a lot of connection that I'm seeing right now between the menopause conversation and the relationship conversation. And, we were with Julie Gottman together at Lisa Bilyeu's house. And one of the phrases she has that I really have used in my own menopausal journey is that women get depressed when they are in relationships where they are saying yes and they really want to say no. And when you say yes and you really want to say no, it builds resentment. I'm the queen.
So much. Me too. Me too.
It's really
there. But we were trained to do that in so many ways. Like that was societally like, I work with so many younger people now, and they're like, what do you mean? Like they can't even fathom that's how it. But we were really kind of taught that that's the way to go along, to get along, be the good girl, be the this, be that person, right?
One of the moments I learned that we grew up in a misogynistic time was when I watched Fast Times at Ridgemont High with my children, and they were like, "What did they just say? Why are they?" I'm like, "Oh, that was the 70s. That was the late 70s. You were allowed to talk to us like that. You can't.
You were allowed to. Isn't that funny? I saw it on. I don't know why I was even watching this 9 to 5, and I'm like,
oh God,
what? Because I watched a documentary, and the 9 to 5 was brought up into it, and then I went back and I watched it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I think that this was funny even to watch this as a comedic show? I can't even.
Horrible.
And that change has only happened recently, sadly.
So fast.
I mean, we say it was like that was then, but the change has only happened recently. I mean, when I got into my career, I was like, thank you for letting me be here. And, can I get your coffee and report your news for you? It was really like, it was very, very different. And so I do think that that's why we're seeing this. I'm sure there's a lot of men that are like, wait, what? But we're seeing women in the last 3 years be so vocal about, everything feed my algorithm. I don't think it's just my algorithm anymore, talking about hormones and
Yep.
nutrition and fitness and fasting and aging better, longevity and menopause and perimenopause. And now I'm seeing men put up perimenopause videos and menopause videos. And so I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I guess it's not a taboo topic so much anymore. Remember we were calling it taboo
Right.
constantly. And I'm like, if we could
Constantly.
never call it taboo, I'd be so happy. So I feel
Yeah.
like we're getting there. But we still have a lot to do. There's still a lot of confusion, you know?
Exactly. And so where do you think men, fit into the conversation? I did in Age Like a Girl, I have an appendix to men. It's actually written to men, directly to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And
Great.
I
Great.
have a husband that has been willing to see my changes, try to understand my changes. We have conversations a lot about like the new you. The other day I bought a baseball cap with a butterfly on it, and I told him when I put the cap on, and that way you know which version of me you're talking to.
I
You're
love
talking
that.
to the butterflied version of me. And so he's
I
been
love that.
he's been amazing. But I had to kind of pull him into. I
Yeah.
know there were things that I was okay with before, and I am no longer okay with them. And
Yeah.
that was hard. That was a hard conversation
It is
to
hard.
have. So where do you see we
Yeah,
can
because
pull
there's no
men
roadmap
in?
for it. There's
No,
no roadmap for that conversation. I mean, there's a roadmap for a lot of other ones, not that one.
right.
I mean, I love that he's willing. I mean, my husband is too. I kind of met my husband in the middle of all of this, you know, so he's only known me screaming the word vagina across
Is
the
it
dining
me?
room table to
I know.
somebody on the phone while we're both sitting there working. So I think men come into the conversation a couple of different ways. Like, first of all, I love that that you have that conversation with your husband and can have that openness. And I like the symbolic part of it with the
Yeah.
butterfly.
Yeah.
Um, I think men have to come in the workplace is one place, but whether they like
Mm-hmm.
it or not, because I think we can't ignore that in that
Mm-hmm.
area because we're working alongside them all the time. And I do think it's incumbent on them to learn some of
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, this is just stuff that wasn't taught. We didn't know. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important for them to just have a understanding of it, that it's not just a joke all the time, because unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
that's how we all grew up. We grew up with the
Yeah.
hot flash being a joke. We grew up with the women being the butt of most jokes. We grew up with this time in life being just the annoying woman that was anxious and moody and hot and sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that men have to come into that conversation in a lot of ways. And because we'll be like this if they're left out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you put that word in, and I think it's important. We did find that when we did these screenings of the documentary, it was all women. And then after about 6 months, men started trickling into them.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd shout them out and be like, "Hey, for the 10 men in the room." And then it'd be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, for the 15 men in the room." So I do think they're interested if they're the kind of guys that care enough. And if and you want, and that's who you want to be with, isn't it?
Right.
Like the person that's
Yes.
proactively going in there saying what's going on, not, I don't know, fix it and then come back to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The one message I wish I could get out to men, and I recently was interviewed on Rich Roll, and he
Yeah.
he sort of played this like, I'm a dude, what do I know? And I was like, here's what I'm gonna tell you, Rich, is that, and please take this with love, but men need to step it up right now and get
Yeah.
to understand what we're going through. I have two of my closest
Yeah.
friends. I have sat in my she shed on my couch at ladies' nights out, and they are both divorced, and they both said, I tried. I took him to therapy. One's husbands wouldn't go to therapy. The other husband was like, everything's fine. Why are you so upset? And I think if there are men listening to this podcast, or if there was a message I could get to men, is just try to understand what
Yep.
we're going through, because you wanting the status quo is no longer around. That is not.
No.
Women are rising up.
No.
And we need to be heard. Menopause is being looked at differently. And that divorce rate, I think, could be changed if men were willing
too.
to see us different.
I do too. I do too. And acknowledge that this change is happening, and it's not just, all right, that's what you're going through, but not everybody could be going through this. I mean, I think unfortunately there's been so much silence around this that was really, along with the damage that it did to women's health, long-term health,
Yeah.
the other damage that it did was just the acceptance of all
Yeah.
this, right? The cultural acceptance of you get through that your own problem and let us know when you got that sorted out.
Yeah.
And so so it is incumbent on men to do that. And I also think that it's interesting, and I've seen it go a couple of different ways. Like I think I've seen it go from like, ugh, the eye roll. Like the first time I went to the Capitol, we were out in front talking about, we were with the Let's Talk Menopause organization, and we were holding a press conference the first time we'd gone there. And we had a couple of people walk by, like, men, And
Hmm.
then recently I was in a TV studio and I was talking about the book, and one of the camera guys came over to me afterwards. He goes, my wife is really suffering right now. Is there a place I can go to
Yeah.
for more information? So I'm seeing men step forward, but I don't think that any of us have the luxury any longer of saying like, oh, not, now let's not talk
Hmm.
about it. It'll figure itself out, especially men,
Yeah. So
especially
we
men.
we dove, my husband and I dove into Esther Perel's teachings,
Yeah,
and one of the
that's great.
things that I love that she says is you will fall in love with 2 to 3 people in your adult life. And some of us that will be with different people, some of us that will be with the same people. So I'll throw in what has been working in my marriage is we actually looked at marriage before kids as marriage 1.0. We looked at marriage with kids as marriage 2.0. And now we refer to our marriage as marriage 3.0, which is
love that.
after kids and Mindy's postmenopausal. And it's been a beautiful way to say, hey, can we talk about this through the lens of marriage 3.0?
Yeah, that's great.
And it just
That's
sort of
just great.
shifted it. It was really beautiful. So, or it has been. I mean, we're still working on it, but it's at least the door is wide open, which was
Yeah.
really a wonderful experience to have a spouse that was willing to do that.
Well,
So,
I have to imagine it made both of you feel safe in coming forward with any changes or thoughts or fears or acknowledgments of something that maybe worked before but isn't going to serve me now.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's nice to feel that safe zone in there
Yeah.
where you're not like, oh gosh, what's the reaction to this going to be? Versus,
Yes.
okay, I have a sounding board, a safe place to go with that.
Right.
I was divorced in my early 40s, and did perimenopause contribute to it? I couldn't say. I mean, I was definitely in that stage of it now that I look back, but I don't even know. He wound up being not the right partner for me, period, inside or outside of that. But I will say that, to go back to where I am today, I started dating in my later 40s, then wound up getting married a second time at 50 years old. What I expect and what I would tolerate, right, in a relationship is very
Mm-hmm.
different than it was before. And I also think I give a lot less pressure too. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little like, now I'm like, this is my life, this is your life, where I say I walk the world with him. Like he's who
Mm-hmm.
I want to walk the world with. But I don't feel like I'm looking to him for all of these answers to my life, right?
Right.
But I certainly do expect both of us to understand each other during this time, because we're getting older together, right? So we
Right.
started our marriage 1.0 at 50,
Mm-hmm.
me
Right.
50, him 60. And so I see how we dance with each other a little bit differently,
Mm-hmm.
even from my mid 40s to where we are now, to where I assume we're going to be as we get
Mm-hmm.
older.
It's
But
beautiful.
it's nice because he's like, he talks about it. He's open about it.
Yeah.
People come up to him now and they're like, "Oh, your wife talks about menopause all the time." And at the beginning, he was like, "Oh gosh, Tamsin, it's a lot." And now he's like, "Yeah, yeah, she's working on another whatever." So it's
Yeah.
become more of his, in his zeitgeist too,
Yeah.
not just in mine.
Right. I'm laughing because that sounds very much like a few of our conversations. Like I'll walk
Yeah,
around and be like, I think my estrogen's off today. Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm a little bitey, blah, blah, blah. I tried adapting, my creams
yeah.
some days I'm like, I start to say something. I'm like, do you not want to hear about hormones today? And he's like, yeah, I'd like a break. Thank you.
I'd like a break. I know.
So
I
I totally get that.
Every once in a while he'll be like, I'm changing my patch or the video, and he's like, you're putting that online, huh? And I go, yeah, I am. And now, I've got a 14-year-old nephew. I'm an 85-year-old father, so my father's like become this. he's become all of a sudden this advocate for menopause, but I'm not sure if he knows the boundaries of it all. So he goes, because I've normalized it now. So, when I lost my mom, I lost her from breast cancer, and we assumed that she went into a medically induced menopause as a result of a double mastectomy and chemotherapy and everything else. And I remember her just being pouring sweat all the time, but we were young and we would like all laugh about it together and didn't know why she was so hot, and never menopause was never brought up, and I was young then, and so when I started going into researching all of this and talking about it more openly, my father said to me, "Do you think that your mom was in menopause?" Like I think she might have been in menopause. And I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure, Dad, that she was." I mean, this is years ago. She died in 1990. So fast forward to today, I published the book. I sent my dad a couple of copies. He's in a super agers group, like a super agers group in the morning.
that.
He has, they meet. It's so cute. And so I said, "Hey, do you want to bring some of books to your super agers? I'll send you some more." And he goes, "Oh, no, those women aren't in menopause." I'm like, "But their daughters probably are. So if you want to do that, how am I going to bring this up, Tamsin? I'm not going to bring." So long story short, I guess some of the conversation happened. And so now the women are coming to him like, "Can we get a copy of the book for our daughter?" So my dad thinks he is like the coolest. He's like my menopause distributor in his super agers group. And then he recently he was in physical therapy, and the woman's like, "Oh, I'm so hot." And he goes, "Do you think it's the menopause?" And I go, "Dad, you can't do that to a woman. You can bring it up subtly, but you can't ask her if she's in menopause."
Yeah, that's a whole nother generation that needs to be taught how to talk to women. So I applaud you. That's pretty
so
funny.
I'm like, "Oh no." Yeah. So but it's interesting to see, it's interesting to see.
I love that everybody's coming to the conversation. It's just really beautiful. What advice would you give a woman about talking about menopause in the workplace? What are we seeing in trends? I know I'll give you an example. I was in London over a year ago doing some interviews and promoting Eat Like a Girl. And I was asked to go into Amazon and speak to a group of women. It was a menopause group. And I was like, of course, I'll come speak to you all. So I go into Amazon London, and I'm talking to hundreds of women. And the leader of the group tells me that what she decided to do was she saw the trends of when women leave the workplace. And it's usually around 45, somewhere between 45 and 50, they leave. And then she figured out what that was costing the company. And so she went to the C-suite, and she was like, "We need to be doing something different here." And they said, "Well, we'll let you have a club." And her thing was, if I can show them the cost of losing a menopausal woman, maybe they will help us through this process a little different. Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, in the research I've done of Lisa Mosconi's work and even some of the grandmother hypothesis, our brains have the ability to get stronger, to be more focused, to bring more to the workplace. Yeah. So what do we need to do to change that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's one of my favorite conversations in all this as we keep going forward, because I think it's kind of that next frontier that we're going to tackle that is not necessarily is really been touched, because we all come from different workplaces, right? One person might be working in a classroom, one's working in a C-suite, one's working, doing, driving. And so so we have all different workplaces. So it's difficult to say, like, we're going to implement a workplace policy, everybody should be doing this, but there's enough of these little nuggets to take away from what we could do, whether it's changing uniforms if you've got somebody that's working in a factory or a distribution center, or it's being able to have a conversation like that, or it's being able to provide, a coaching or telehealth services via insurance, right? Or making people at least feel comfortable about the conversation. So those kind of accommodations. What we don't want is it to ever work against women, so that when they're penalized, or that it's working against them, where we say, "Oh gosh, okay, we're not going to hire this person because of that." But I think that we're able to show financially that retaining this level of woman, this age of woman, this experience of woman is helpful for the organization. So I don't think businesses can afford to ignore this now. I think that that's pretty clear. I did an article for Harvard Business Review a few years ago, and we had a hard time finding companies that had been implementing policy, which was very interesting. When we did the documentary, Emory, we worked with Genentech, who realized that they had a need for this. And so they implemented workplace policy. And so that's encouraging to see with some of the larger ones. I came from a media company and I brought this in like 3 or 4 years ago, and they said to me, you can have a group if that's what you want, but we're not going to do anything on paper
Right.
like that. And so that was a real disappointment. I was like, they said, what is a menopause policy? And I said, women need help.
Right.
So I do like seeing it in the workplace. I think if I was talking to somebody and said, like, how do you want to implement that? However you can. And if that means it's 2 to 3 women that are meeting about it, or it's something where you have a big enough company where you can say, I'm going to go into the HR department and say, we need something where even if it's access to coaching, even if it's access to bringing somebody like you or me into a workplace to have a conversation.
Talk about it. Yeah.
Because I don't think it's always easy for a workplace to say, okay, everybody that's menopausal, you want to understand menopause, come in here and do it. I think
Right.
it's easier for a third party to come in and say, hey, if anybody wants to have this discussion, we're here and open to that discussion. And I think that's the easiest thing a workplace could do, honestly,
Yeah.
for themselves and for the women that they're trying to help.
And what if you're
start there.
yeah, and what if you're a woman in a workplace that doesn't understand you? Are there advocacy groups right
Yeah.
now? Yeah, what are they?
Oh, having different advocacy groups?
Yeah, like do we have like a general, like we need like a advocacy? I feel like I saw
we have
one.
guidelines. We have
Okay.
guidelines for it. Did you see a group itself for workplace?
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, and I forget the name, but I started to follow them on Instagram.
Okay.
That they are actually helping. Like a company could hire them.
Oh, yes, they have those.
Put a policy in.
Yes,
I don't
there's a few
know
of them.
if they're an advocacy group for women themselves, but what we hear a lot is that women just feel gun shy to say
Yep.
anything. They still,
They do, of course.
yeah, still don't want to. So how do you know when you should say something and when you shouldn't, and when you're being mistreated? Like we don't have a solid advocacy group like that, do we?
We do not. Menopause Society's put some guidelines together that could be helpful to have for HR directors and resources that are in place. We have some on the website, the M Factor, which is like these are for employees and these are for employers to understand your rights. And I think there's a company called Adobe that is able to do that, is able to go into an actual workplace and implement policy.
Yeah. So you just have to do a little bit of homework on it. So,
You've got to do homework on it and also decide if, what you can do inside or outside of there. But I do think that HR is becoming more aware of it. And there's even some state by state lawmakers that are talking about this, and they make sure that women are not penalized, if they are dealing with menopause or they're menopausal. So I think that that's promising too. I just don't rely on that for every state or for every business, because I think that makes it hard. So again, it's funny. I found myself when I was doing all the interviews for the book going, well, the onus is on the women. So unfortunately it's on us. Unfortunately it's but it really is right now. But if that's what it's going to take, we're up for the task as usual.
I had, right, as usual.
As usual. I had
Let's
to add
point
that in
that
there.
out. Yeah.
Sorry.
I had a strategy when my kids were little. I decided to create a team of doctors that I would go and ask opinions of, knowing
that's
that
great.
as a mother, a lot of times you're skewed. You can't quite doctor your own child. So it was everything from really alternative to super conservative. And what I did is anytime my children were sick, I would poll this team. And then I would sit back and I would listen and I would decide what felt the best to me. And I think there needs to be that might be the moment we're at, is if you're in a sticky situation in work, you need to sort of look at what your options are and then figure out what feels right. Because you're right. Again, the onus is really up to us. So
and it's a workplace. Every workplace is so different too. And I think that's what you have to take into consideration. What might feel comfortable to one woman walking in and bulldozing into the HR office and saying like, this is what we need, is not going to feel comfortable to somebody else that might be at an age where they go, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm still here, because I did go through that myself in the workplace. Like I was very like, oh, I was in television, and that's a very youth, forward facing youth industry. I'd be like, oh, yay, my key card still works, so I understand that mindset of feeling appreciative. Wow. I'd be like, phew. Okay, one more day.
Every day.
So I understand it. I do understand that it's not quite as easy as everybody feels that same level of boldness depending on the situation.
Recently, there was something that came out a couple months ago that really excited me, and it was a conversation with Sophia Bush and Michelle Obama on Sophia's podcast. And what excited me was not what came from that, because really what the zeitgeist did when Michelle started to beat to her own drum is they started to assume she was leaving Barack. And basically she didn't show up at Jimmy Carter's memorial. She didn't show up at a couple inaugural things. And so everybody assumed she was leaving Barack. And she went on the podcast and said, I'm finally doing life for me. And we are seeing, it was so great. I was like, I was like clapping from my living room at 10 o'clock at night when I saw it come out in the New York Times.
Yeah.
When you were out doing book tours, all the experts you were talking about, how much of menopause do you think is a transformational moment where we finally start to do life the way we want to do it? We start listening to ourselves and not pulling everybody around us. I think she's just a small little piece of a microcosm of women that are finally saying enough. What are your thoughts?
I love that you use the word polling everyone around you. My brother used to say, like, Tamsin likes to take a poll before she makes a decision. And I did forever. I'd be like, what do you think?
A lot of women.
Hey. And but I didn't even realize it at the time. I just knew that, like, I wanted everyone to be happy and be happy with my decision. And I actually didn't even have confidence in myself to do that. And now I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing.
Right.
And I always thought, like, man, I can't wait to be like her. I'd see an older woman, I'd be like, she's so brave, and hopefully one day I'll be brave. I didn't understand where it came from. And I too was like, oh yes, if Michelle Obama is doing that, then I'm going to do it my way too. And so I think that those kind of conversations and hearing that admission, and I loved it myself for the same reasons, gives us permission slips to do those kind of things. And I think that this is a time in our lives where we just get them, I mean, I think that we've got to give them to ourselves. I don't know how quickly it happens, because I do still think that what happens early on during this period of time is all consuming, right? You're not feeling right. You're not sleeping. You feel like you're gaining weight. You're anxious. You have rage. You're dealing with a relationship at the same time. And then all the other things that we know happen in this, especially sandwich generation. And so, I get excited when women kind of get to the other side and start feeling a little bit better, and even better than before. And I really do believe that. Like, I do believe that you feel even better than before.
Agreed.
Because you've got that grounding of who you are, and then you have permission to do that. I don't know that she would have done that at 40 years old. I don't know that she would have done that at 43 years old by her own admission, but I do think now it's like, if I'm not doing it now, when the heck am I doing it? Right. And so I do feel like we're done waiting for someday. There's no question
and if where my brain goes crazy is when I think about like 1.2 billion women by 2030 are going to be in menopause. Ooh, we could take over the world, women.
I know.
We understood how powerful we are, and this was such a big part of Age Like a Girl, was like how if you understood that your brain reorganized itself so that you're living 42.5% of your life to stand in a leadership position, that we could change the world. That's what I'm trying to get out there.
I am convinced of it. And I know you will and are, because you're right. I mean, 1.2 billion. Imagine this. And I also think what's interesting about this whole period of time is that it's not just the US. Like, we're talking about women all over the world that are part of this now. This conversation has really, like, when I go on social media for any given day, there are women all over the world having a very similar conversation with me. Yeah. And I think that part's super fascinating. Like, I think it's fascinating it doesn't have these boundaries right now, that we're seeing it all over the place. And we're all speaking the same language about this at this part of our lives.
Right. Which leads me on this final thought, which is, can we talk about Melanie Sanders? Holy shit. That is like, to
Amazing.
Me, that woman, from a journalist angle, she stood up one day because she had enough.
I know.
She said
I love it.
And everybody was like, I don't care either. I don't care.
Yeah.
What do you,
Yes.
has anybody checked in to see how she's doing? Because she
Fascinating. I emailed back and forth with her just a little bit, and it's because she had done a video with my book, and I was like, oh
Mm,
my gosh, that was like so kind. But I look, I think that she voiced what all of us have been feeling and maybe
mhm.
just didn't know how or just weren't brave enough to do it. But
Yeah,
whatever it really struck a nerve. And you can't, I
yeah,
mean, it's just been phenomenal and how it took root. And like, Kristen Chenoweth just did one, and it was just, I really smile. And so
yeah,
anytime one of her video pops up, I'm like heart, 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 like,
yeah,
love you. Because I do think that it's pretty special, and it's really, really the theme where we are and what we're talking
yeah.
about right now. It's
Right.
it's everything we're talking about with the female brain. It's everything we're talking about this transition and getting rid of some of the dusty stuff and kind of renovating our heads and our inner lives.
Yeah. I hope so. I keep saying, I hope somebody's helping her navigate this career moment,
Yes,
which she
yes,
found
yes.
herself in, because I don't think
Yeah,
she signed
yeah.
up for this. So,
No, no, but it's an exciting time, that's for sure.
yeah. Where do you think the conversation's going? Like I have watched it go from nothing to chaos to a little more into empowerment and
Hmm.
transformation. We all need to be talking. Like, where do you think the conversation's going, and will it eventually settle in where this is just a normal process that everybody understands? What's your vision on that?
That's where we're winning when that happens.
Mm,
When it
yeah.
when it goes into that normal process where it's not this like thing, right? That's where we know that we've kind of hit our sweet spot, I think. And that's where we know also, I believe, that real change is being made, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it
Yeah.
becomes something that we're not having to point out. It's
Mm,
part of our lives. Everybody is real clear of what it
mm,
is. So we're
mm-hmm.
not, the learning curve is, we don't talk about a learning curve of pregnancy anymore, or a learning curve of periods, or a learning
Right.
curve of so many different things. I do think it's going into the longevity conversation. There's no
Mm,
question, and not to
yeah.
like overuse that term, but like, but maybe from a woman's point of view too,
Mm-hmm.
not just
Yeah.
from, not just from guys. And then I also think it's like coming into our own. I always said like these aren't our golden years or our bolden years. And I do
Yeah.
think that there is something about that
Yeah.
happens for women because we really haven't had that opportunity yet. We've made very swift changes. I went back and I watched the Gloria Steinem documentary, and it,
Hmm.
it wasn't that long ago that, we were like,
Right.
hey, we're here, and we're not just in,
Right.
and so to see where we are, where we've
Yeah.
gone since then, I think that we still have a lot of work to do. And so I think that that's going to be that next part of the conversation, is to owning that, understanding what empowerment really means, not asking for permission,
Right.
not being like, oh, well, there's two women in charge now. Oh, great. But
Right.
there's 51% of us. So
Right.
so I'm hoping that we settle first into that, and then we move into that next thing of to seeing what women are even more capable of,
Yeah.
getting the help that they need, getting the sleep that they deserve to get, feeling like their bodies are functioning at full capacity, because we've got another how many decades? 3 to 4 decades
We
left.
got
We've got a
some
lot of
time.
time. We got a lot
we
of
got
time that
we
I
got some
wasn't
time and
prepared
some
for.
yeah, and some things to do. We have some things to do.
Yes,
My
we
one
do.
of one of my favorite comments that my literary agent made to me, that I just adore her. She's like, I got to stick around so I can see what's going to happen to the world right now, because there's a lot of belief that the
Yeah.
misogyny is actually in an extinction bubble, that it's
Yeah.
rearing its ugly head before it goes away. And when we look at the 1.2 billion women going into menopause, it's like, hey, this is getting exciting now. We don't know where we're going, but I have a feeling it's going to be really good.
Yeah,
So,
I do too.
yeah.
I do too, and I'm excited for it, and I'm proud to be standing, with women like you, leading this charge and the conversation with the knowledge and education that we need,
Yeah.
and we need it. Like we can't. I hope I never see that part slow down, because I
Yeah.
think that
Agreed.
we're learning a lot, and luckily, like, now we're mandated to be in research studies, and we've got
That's
some
good.
incredible women at the forefront doing that research, and so that's
Yeah.
exciting to me.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Tamsin, I love this. Thank you.
Me too.
I'm
coming to the shed next.
Yes, yes. You need to come to the She Shed and sit on my couch with me next to my womb crystal, and
I would love that.
In your pajamas, and have
I would love that.
Have a great conversation. So, but I really appreciate what you putting your hat in the ring, the menopausal ring, and bringing the journalist perspective and all the interviews you've done. And when your book came out, by the way, I was like, that is a brilliant title. And
Thank you.
I love titles, and I love
Me too.
phrases because they stick. But yeah, we need to know how to menopause. How do we do this? And it is so dense with information. So, where do people find it? Or let me ask it this way. Where's your preferred place that people go get it?
Gosh, anywhere, howtomenopause.com. And of course, wherever you buy books, like, if you Amazon, it's on sale there right now, but any of your local bookstores, that's why we did the tour all around to hit the local bookstores, because that's always important to me.
Great.
Well, thank you.
So thank you, Tamzin. I appreciate
so
your time. I know. Agreed.
Thank
Let's do
you
it again.
so much.
We'll do it in New York.
I'm your girl.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate you.